So you are constantly doing board development. Your nominations committee, whether it's a standing committee or part of the governance committee, is constantly looking for ways to bring talent onto the board. And when I say talent, I want to also talk about diversity. So diversity means people who have different expertise. It means people of different ages. It means people of different ethnic, religious backgrounds. It means people who are going to come with new ideas and really enrich your board because you have that level of diversity.
Well, and perspectives too. It's not just because somebody's going to come up. I mean, there are only so many ways you can add two numbers together, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a perspective on how the sum of those numbers is impacting you differently than somebody else, that's huge.
Right.
And that boards that they might look diverse in some of the ways you described, but may not have different perspectives on
Right.
how that impacts somebody.
So diversity is perspective, experience, expertise, background, and age.
Yeah, yeah.
And gender, of course.
Well, and around a common goal. So if you're talking about a faith-based organization, you know, nobody's expecting you to have people of different faith traditions in that on that board, but they are expecting that within your faith tradition to have those different perspectives and those different representation, for lack of a better word, on that group.
Yeah, the more diversity you can have, the more exciting your board is and the more they contribute to your organization.
Exciting in a positive way, of course.
Totally positive. Dynamic.
Right. Yes, you don't want to have it too exciting when people are, because we could say certain things are exciting but not always positive. But you also brought up something I think is really important, which is a governance committee as opposed to just a nomination committee. Governance committee, we talked about in another webinar we did together, is about evaluating. It's about looking forward to who and how the group itself is working together, as opposed to just in effect, the headhunters for the board who are going to go out and find that next person. You know, I joke in some of the fundraising seminars I do, where I take somebody's purse or wallet and then I ask for their wrist and I said, okay, good, you qualify, you have a pulse and a wallet. Right. And you know, nomination committees can sometimes devolve into that, where a governance committee, if it's looking more broadly, that gives them a whole different perspective.
So the governance committee is a standing committee. You may have temporary nominating committees. You may have a temporary, like an adjunct. Is that the word I want? Adjunct?
I guess, yeah.
Strategic planning committee.
Yeah.
But governance is a permanent committee on the board. And they're the strategic oversight for the board.
And really can be, even more than the executive committee, in the long term, the most influential group on the board.
Absolutely. It's such a critical committee.
Yeah, because we know people are it.
Yeah.
And this is the group that's responsible for the people, the care and feeding of the people on the board.
Which is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So we start out with identifying board members. I like to think that there's a chance that you know who you're getting because they've served on a committee and not just because they're a neighbor of somebody who's on the board. So I know I do this for a living. I think it's important to reference people before they come to your board.
Yeah.
And I would call to speak to people from other boards they've been on and ask how they've contributed and how they've been a valued member.
Well, and even if nothing else, do a internet search on them. Yeah, I mean, really.
Well, that's first and foremost.
Well, right. You're
but
right.
I want to do referencing for them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different than bringing on professional staff.
Yep.
These are the people who are going to be the sustainability of your board. You don't want any surprises. You don't want people who are going to take you in a totally different direction. You don't want people who are going to embarrass you. So you really, really, really want to do referencing.
Well, and not just future embarrassment, but past issues that they've dealt with that you might say, you know what, that's just not where I want to be, even if it has little to do with what you're doing. Yeah, you know, I mean, you don't know what's out there that somebody might find that could conflict with your mission and values.
So I have a mantra. My mantra is I don't like surprises.
Yeah, right. No ta-da moments.
No ta-da. When I'm hiring people, when I'm expected to do something, no surprises. You don't want any surprises with board members either. So you're going to be referencing them. You're going to hopefully have had them on a committee or a project so you know that they're both invested in the organization and some sense of how they show up.
Well, and one of the things that, so talk about referencing and all that, I think of target marketing, right? What's your profile that you want to develop for the next person on your board? Is, what in terms of.
You mean think about this, not just like who's available?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. No wallet, no pulse. Go back to, what looking at, and this is what a governance committee can do. They can look at what's out there now, and now what do you need to get whatever perspective is that's missing on that group. And so are you looking for a young person who's a man who comes in from this kind of work background or whatever it is, right? To be able to make that happen without, like I said, just kind of finding out who's available.
Yeah, it's not just who shows up.
Right.
Really, this is really where we're talking about being strategic and thinking about what you want for leadership for the organization.
Yeah.
So you're going to identify the people, you're going to have a plan of term limits so people are continually moving forward on the board. And you're assessing board talent on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So we talked about board members having expectations. The governance committee is responsible for making sure that people are meeting their expectations. Somebody hasn't been to them, they've missed 3 meetings, they're not showing up for committee meetings. Talk to them, find out what's going on. Maybe they want a hiatus from the board because something's going on, or maybe they're not engaged.
Well, and this is, and especially when you get into people who are, well, for lack of a better term, famous, right? Or somebody who is notable in the community that you want to have engaged with the organization, and you say, oh, well, we'll put them on the board. You got to step back and think about that and say, well, maybe an advisory board is the best place for that person because they can't show up to meetings, or they're always going to send a representative to a meeting, which, that doesn't cut it. You need to have the person themselves there. Make the representative a board member. That's fine.
Oh, yeah, totally. But then they're engaged and they're responsible.
Exactly.
That's
right.
fine.
Yeah. So the board is not your only option, is the point here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you need to develop a different option for people who you want to have connected who aren't board material for any number of reasons.
And I also want to say that I have a bias, and I know this is going to be hard if you have geographic diversity,
Mm-hmm.
and then board meetings are a little more challenging. But if you don't have geographic diversity and people are within a range that they can physically show up, I expect them to show up.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it means that you have to rotate when you have meetings,
right,
where you have meetings, then consider that. But people don't get to call in for a board meeting because then you lose the dynamic dialogue.
If you absolutely have to do it, then actually I just saw a beautiful little Google device. But you can always project their face, not just their voice, but their face on a computer screen, and have them in effect participate that way, with a camera. Not just everybody's around the table and there's that person at the end of the table with their looking across at everybody else.
Well, that's interesting. It's just they can't see everybody else's faces.
Well, maybe, it depends on how you have that set up.
So I just want to be clear, that's my bias.
Yeah.
I prefer face-to-face when possible.
Yeah.
And phone if it's an emergency, and maybe it's time limited for one discussion based on one issue that you have to talk about.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's one other thing that you brought up that it reminded me of a client that we worked with years ago. We never took the client, but if you recall that somebody said when we asked them, do you have term limits? And they said no. But I thought the answer was probably the best answer I have heard. So in my career lifetime, I have seen term limits kind of come in vogue with nonprofits. And I think there's a lot of strong reason for that. But what also happens is that you tend to wait out people and have their term expire and not renew them when you really should just make a move and move forward. It takes the hard conversation out of this. And I love the guy's answer when he said, Well, we don't have term limits. If they're not doing a good job, I take them to the diner and we have a talk. Which always, I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to the diner. Oh no, right? But you know what? But he wasn't afraid to have the hard
Right.
talk. And that's the point. Whether you have term limits or not, you can't be afraid of having the hard talk. And I know, nobody wants.
That's true. So
Yeah,
people
conflict.
rely on term limits as a way to move people off when you should be assessing people on a regular basis and having a real
Yeah,
conversation with them. Hey, what's going on? I've missed you. You haven't showed up.
yeah,
What's happening? And sometimes people are really happy that somebody initiated that conversation.
exactly. Right. Because they know
You
they're
know,
not stupid. They know what's going on.
they joined the board and it's not working for them,
Right.
either in their life or their commitment. Have that conversation with them.
Yeah. Chances are that they will gracefully step back because they know it's not working for them. And that's
Yeah,
and that's a
or
good
have
thing.
somebody else sit in. They may
Right.
recommend somebody else, or they may say, I really love this organization. This is such a difficult time for me in my life. Can I step back and be considered at a later time?
Right. Or join the advisory board or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And you don't want to lose their connection with the organization. You don't want
Right.
to tell people they have to leave. You want to massage it so they can be engaged differently.
Right. On their terms that works for them, because if
Right.
it works for them, it's going to work for
The
you.
last thing you want to do is have bad blood with anybody on your board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there should, again, no surprises. They shouldn't be involved in something and then you learn about it later and you have to say, hey, this isn't working. You're out of here.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So the board needs a lot of care and feeding.
Right. Right. And sometimes you take them to the diner. All right. Well, hey, Priscilla, thanks so much for your time and expertise in this. I think
was a
we
pleasure.
covered a lot of good work. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
My firm is Leadership Recruiters. You can contact me through LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to get me.
Sounds good. All right. This is Matt Hug for Nonprofit.Courses and Priscilla Rosenwald from Leadership Recruiters.
Thank you.
And
Have fun.
And have a great nonprofit day.
Thanks.